In today's video, we're playing around with glitter. I've already got it all over the place, a notoriously messy subject, but it's really interesting to capture up close using your macro lens. So I'm going to go and get started. I'll see you in just a sec. Hi guys, I'm Ben from Adaptalux and welcome to another macro photography tutorial where today we're playing around with this little makeup brush and some glitter. I want to fill the end of this brush, all of these tiny little bristles. I want to fill them with glitter and try and get some interesting shots across the top of here, lighting it in different ways. Hopefully a lot of interesting bokeh, a lot of interesting shapes, and I think the shape of the glitter that I've got actually really complements the wild nature of the bristles on the brush. So I'm going to go and put some glitter into my brush and see what we can get using the new Adaptalux flash lighting arms. So I've got my camera at the ready, but before we do anything with the camera and photography, we need to talk about the glitter. Now my wife has kindly donated some of her little glittery pots here with a few different types, including some really large gold stuff and some really large pink bits as well. It's blowing everywhere as I talk. But the first thing that you need to do when you're dealing with glitter is actually get out a piece of paper. So I've got two little Petri dishes here which I'll be using to dip my brush in and gather some glitter onto the end of my brush. But once you start taking your glitter out of those little containers, it's going to get everywhere. So a piece of paper down on the ground will allow you to fold it in half and quite easily get the majority of the glitter back into the container. Now, without thinking about that beforehand, you get glitter all over the table like I did, but if you get a piece of paper, you'll get the majority of it back where it's supposed to be. Now, what I'm going to be doing is grabbing my little Petri dishes of glitter. I'm going to be filling up the end of this little makeup brush, and then it's giving me a really nice shiny look to the top of my brush. Lots of little pieces of glitter sat up on the top of there. So I'm going to place that upright like this, and it's going to allow me to light the top of my brush and get a good angle looking all the way around it with a lot of depth of field looking in from the sides. So I'm going to grab my camera, set it up on a tripod and set up some lighting so that we can see what this looks like under a macro lens. So here's the setup. I've got my my little makeup brush sat here on top of the paper to catch as much of that glitter as possible with varying degrees of success. It's mostly stuck to my hands and all over the table, all over the floor. It's probably in my beard as well, but we'll deal with that later. That paper is going to be really handy for folding in half, just catching as much of it as possible. Over here I've got my camera. So this is my Sony a7 III with a 100mm f2.8 Tachyna lens on the front of it. On the top of that you can see the flash emitter. That's going to trigger the flash arms, our lighting, which is over here. I've got the Control Pod 3 with two flash lighting arms on a mini tripod, which is going to give me a lot of flexibility of where I want my light to come from. I've got one bent around the front here with a directional diffuser on the front of the lighting arm, just to give the front of the makeup brush a little bit of soft diffused light on the front. At the back here, I also want to light some of that glitter on the back of the brush, hopefully to give us a little bit of bokeh in the background. You'll also notice that the control pod is actually plugged into the mains here, so you can actually leave the control pod plugged in and use it while it's charging if you want to. Means that you don't have to worry about battery life. Now there's one last piece to this equation, and that's just another lighting arm. It's really hard to focus when you're using flash because the exposure that you see in the camera isn't the actual exposure that you're going to get when the flash goes off. That means that if you're using a mirrorless camera like mine, your viewfinder might be really dark, it might be really hard to focus after you've set all of your settings for the exposure of the flash. A focusing light in the form of a white LED arm can really help to just lighten up your subject, and when you're ready to take your shot, you can either just turn it off or pop it out of the pod. So I'm going to focus on the top of my, my brush now and see what I can actually get, setting off my flashes and see whether any of this glitter sparkles like I think it might. So I've made a small change to my setup here. I've actually clipped a Raynox clip-on adapter to the front of my 100mm lens just to get a little bit more magnification. I want to get as close to these little bits of glitter as possible. They're all different shapes. We've got circles and like hexagons and things in there. So I think that geometric shape of this large glitter compared with the bristles of the brush, I think that's a nice contrast. And getting it a little bit closer is always nicer, especially when you've got something interesting and shiny like this. A quick swap over to some gold glitter gives us some more shapes to play with and some more colours. I actually really like this gold and glitter. Now this is really quite large glitter actually as far as it goes, but I do have some little dusty glitter. I'm going to try that in just a moment, but there's one thing that I want to try first, and that's looking down from the top. So I've transplanted my camera up onto the table, still on its tripod, but now looking down onto the top of my makeup brush. This is giving me a completely different angle on this weird little shot that I'm after, and it's giving me a lot more bokeh because of the depth, because of the difference between the top of the brush and where all of this spilled glitter is now lying on the floor. We need to change our lighting to reflect up from that glitter on the background and try and get a little bit of extra bokeh as well. So that's what this lighting arm here is doing. It's actually shining down past the edge of the brush and bouncing off the table and then back up to the lens where we've got lots of little bits of glitter down, creating some nice out of focus bokeh in the background. This lighting arm is still coming around the side and lighting the top of my brush, and I think together those create a nice little shot down from the top. The last shot that I want to get today is using some of these really little fine glittery makeups, which is what the brush is designed for, and it holds that powder really well. This is really fine stuff, and if you get some on a brush, you can actually see the powder rising up off the brush as you play around with it. That's what I want to capture. I want to see if I can get some particles moving around the outside of the brush and freeze that using the really fast flash of the flash lighting arms. So I've got a single flash lighting arm coming down from the top now and from slightly behind. That should highlight some of those particles moving around, just like it did with our smoke tutorial, which I'll link up in the top right hand corner if you want more of this sort of particle effect stuff. Now I'm going to load up my brush with some of this really fine dust and start playing around with it, see if I can't capture some moving around the tip of my brush. So some limited success on that last one with the powdered glitter. It's really quite messy. I'm sure a lot of you, when I said glitter in the first place, were thinking, is that a good idea? Turns out maybe not. There's glitter absolutely everywhere, but it is a really fun subject to shoot, and I think I got some interesting shots using the brush here as a little staging platform for that glitter. Glitter on its own, it might not be that interesting if it's just sat there. You definitely need a focal point for the images, and for that I think the bristles of my brush worked quite well. You can use all sorts of other things, maybe put some glitter in amongst some other objects, but I will warn you that it does get absolutely everywhere. Be warned that when you get this stuff out, it's not going back without a fight. Now, I've really enjoyed shooting with the glitter. I'm not going to enjoy cleaning up the glitter quite as much, but let me know what you guys think to today's little shoot down in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like so that I know that you enjoyed this content. For now, that is all that I've got time for. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.